Good evening, good morning for many of you who are tuning in from around the world. My name is David Adler and I'm the General Coordinator of the Progressive International. We're convened here on the 28th of March in an extreme context of political crisis and repression in Turkey, and more specifically against our friends, colleagues, and comrades in the People's Democratic Party, the HDP. And so we've convened this emergency briefing with parliamentarians from around the world and spokespeople from the party itself to make sense of the situation, to take stock of a years-long campaign to crack down on dissent across Turkey and silence some of the voices of the Kurdish struggle, and to build a more effective form of international solidarity that can win back those rights to free expression and free political prisoners in Turkey and indeed around the world. So in that vein, I want to turn the mic over to my colleague and friend, Siara, who is a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe as a representative of the People's Democratic Party. And I was hoping that you could give us some introductory remarks this evening to help explain what are the stakes of this particular situation and what are the events last week in particular telling us about the direction of the political crisis in Turkey and perhaps elsewhere in the world.
Okay, thank you so much, David, for organizing this panel, and I'm very happy here to exchange ideas with colleagues, comrades all around the world. The HDP has been under tremendous pressure of the government since 2015. So the kind of crackdown that we are having now is not new, but it gained momentum, and now actually we are at a different stage of the that repression, that ongoing repression, because we have now a court case on the closure of the HDP as a political entity. So with the termination of the peace process between the Turkish government and the Kurdish movement in 2015, the attacks on the HDP started. Even before the June elections, June 2015 elections, there were a lot of attacks, physical attacks on our party members. Many people were injured, some got killed. And then in the November elections, 2015, before the November elections, more than 400 offices of the HDP were vandalized. They were attacked by the, pro-government forces, paramilitary forces. And since 2016, we have been having almost a systematic regime of detentions, of arrests. So far, more than 17,000 administrators and members of the HDP have been taken into custody. More than 5,000 of them have been imprisoned. They are still in prison, including our former co-chairs, Selahattin Demirtas and Figen Yüksekdağ, several other members of parliament, countless mayors, elected mayors, and administrators and party members. And so that has been going on. And of course, the HDP forms a very key part of the broader democratic political opposition in the country. There is a general, of course, crackdown on the broader democratic society in Turkey, but the HDP is at the core of that repression, because we do have a kind of kingmaker position in politics in Turkey. That is why before going for another presidential elections, the government wants to render totally dysfunctional the HDP, to paralyze the HDP organizationally so that they can stay in power. So last week, actually, about 10 days ago, on the 17th of March, another member of parliament, Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu, was removed from his seat. And also on the same day, there was a closure case launched by the prosecutor at the Constitutional Court. So the government, the Turkish government, President Erdoğan and his allies are truly suffocating now. It is a very, very challenging situation for them. The government does have a huge economic and financial crisis. The pandemic is hitting the country and it is not under control. It is almost totally out of control. Turkey does have a lot of regional problems in Syria, in Libya, in Azerbaijan, and And there are bad relations between Turkey and the United States, and with Europe, they are trying to have some compromise, but somehow, the government is very much cornered, squeezed, and suffocating. And within that context, they are attacking the HDP in order to, on the one hand, to consolidate the nationalist masses there. That is one thing. And they are definitely getting prepared for the coming elections. Normally, they are scheduled for June 2023, but they may be even earlier. But the government knows that if they can't eliminate the HDP from the field of politics in Turkey, it may not be possible for Erdogan and his allies to stay in power. If you remember, in 2019, in the local elections, we supported opposition candidates in many Turkish provinces. And in almost every single one of them, Erdogan had a huge defeat in Istanbul, in Ankara, Antalya, Adana, all those places. So the fear of President Erdogan and his allies is that if the HDP can repeat the same strategy in the presidential elections, that is definitely going to be the end of Erdogan's rule. We will be going into a post-Erdogan period, hopefully. And that is why these attacks on the HDP is not just to eliminate a political party. This is a survival issue for President Erdogan, and the same goes for us. It's a survival issue for us as well. Later we can talk more, but let me just one last comment so that we can, give space to other speakers. The government is committed to destroying the HDP, and as a political entity, the HDP may no longer exist sometime soon because they have facilitated the process for closing the HDP. The first hearing will happen, the first review by the Constitutional Court will happen actually 2 days later on the 31st, this early. So they are in a rush, that is very obvious. Individually, I am also among those people who may be politically banned. There are like 670 something people who may be banned from politics for some certain period of time. I mean, individually or as a political entity, the HDP may not survive. But we do represent a very complex sociology and history of political and social struggles in Turkey. So that fact is going to remain with politics in Turkey and in Kurdistan. Even if they ban us as a political party and exclude many current administrators from politics, but the kind of problems, conflicts, contradictions that we articulate into politics are going to stay, and more than 6 million people who support the HDP are going to stay there. So in that sense, these kind of the closure of the HDP is kind of a weakness of the government, I would say. Previously, more than 6 political parties were banned. Pro-Kurdish political parties, but each time we somehow came stronger, even more powerful. The government is not trying to, I would say, address the issue. It is just to gain more time until the elections. I think that is their strategy now. So in order to win in the elections, one way or another, they are committed to destroying the HDP. And we, as the HDP, are trying our best to make sure that we can overcome the kind of the political system established by President Erdogan and his allies. Despite all these dire circumstances, I should say there is still a lot of hope in the air. Our morale is good. I don't know whether you were able to see the Nowruz celebrations 4 days after the closure case. Like millions of people were everywhere. They were supporting their support to the HDP. Despite all these pressures, I am still very optimistic that we can overcome President Erdogan, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's very interesting for us to consider these tactics of legal warfare or lawfare that are so prevalent across continents. And in that spirit of thinking across borders, I wanted to invite Yanis Varoufakis, a member of Hellenic Parliament and General Secretary of Meta 25, to take the floor and offer some words on this escalating crisis in Turkey and what it looks like from Greece.
Thank you, David. The reason we're here, primarily, is to lend solidarity and strength to our comrades of the HDP and Democrats more broadly in Turkey. Your struggle is our struggle. It sounds like a commonplace statement, but it has never been more pertinent than it is today, and full of meaning. Because allow me to begin with, take all the tactical stuff away. Because of course Erdogan is worried that his hold of power is weakening, and he will do whatever autocrats in Turkey and elsewhere have done every time they feel that the ground under their feet is shaking. They will divide us. They will use increasing doses of authoritarianism. They will increase tensions in the region in order to call upon patriots to support them in our country's difficult moment. But setting this aside for a moment, ever since I can remember, ever since I was a child, I have this memory, this very, very strong memory. I grew up in Greece. Turkey was next door. We had dictatorial oligarchic regimes in my country and in Turkey that held on to power by doing two things simultaneously. One was to divide our peoples using policies. Austerity, for instance, is a standard trick, but also using nationalism as a means by which to divide the Greeks, and in Turkey the same thing, between patriots and traitors. And that division has always been intermingled with the charge of sedition or terrorism, both in Greece and in Turkey. And in the end, allow me just to be an economist for 1 second. If you follow the money, it all makes perfect sense. The same families in Turkey and the same families in Greece got rich as a result of this. They were the ones involved in procurement, both of weaponry. It's really very interesting. If you look at the Greek Navy and the Turkish Navy, they're identical. It's the same ships, purchased from the same agent in the United States. They used to serve as US Navy ships, side by side. Now one is Greek, one is Turkish. They have the same weaponry provided by the same merchants of doom, right? What we are being accused here of, Mera 25, the opposition, who is pointing this out, is what? Of being traitors to our nation and supporting Turkey. And what you are being accused of is being traitors to the nation and supporting whatever, Kurdistan, Greece, Russia, Syria, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. The whole point is to divide and rule over our people for very specific gain. Very specific gain. This is not an ideological war from their perspective. Erdogan is not an ideologue. Mitsotakis is not an ideologue. It's what Hannah Arendt described as the banality of evil. They're banal people. They're not even nationalists or Muslims or Christians no. They are utilizing and weaponizing religion, patriotism, ideology, neoliberalism, socialism. Ejevit was a socialist. I mean, for God's sakes. Or claim to be one. But in the end, if you follow the money, you get the picture. So from where we are standing here, speaking now as a member of Greece's parliament, every time they want to push through some sordid contract that enriches the oligarchy, immediately they bring up Turkey in the narrative and try to force our people to take sides. Are you with Turkey or are you against Turkey? And they're doing the same thing in your country. Are you with Turkey or against Turkey? Are you with Greece or against Greece? And yet you can see the hypocrisy that is overflowing. It's just, sort of flooding the Eastern Mediterranean. You've got Erdogan presenting himself as the Messiah of Sunni Islam in the whole region, right? And you've got Mitsotakis, our prime minister here, who is presenting himself as a Christian warlord, who together with Netanyahu and the Cypriot president and ExxonMobil and Total will create a corridor of natural gas and oil extraction from Greece via Cyprus all the way to Israel, right? And Erdogan is presenting this as a great threat to Turkey, the external threat. The internal is the HDP, right? Similarly in Greece, the external threat is Erdogan, the internal is us. And all along what they're doing is they're signing beautiful deals. In the end, Erdogan and Israel are finding common ground, and now they're going to have a new pipeline between them. So, it's all smoke and mirrors for the purposes of enriching the very few and dividing and ruling over the very many. So this is why the banal and commonplace expression, your struggle is our struggle, is not banal and it is not commonplace, and why it is more pertinent today than it ever was. But this is not just about our part of the world, our corner in the Eastern Mediterranean, because the plot thickens once you zoom out of the Eastern Mediterranean. I mentioned ExxonMobil. That's the United States. That's NATO. You have German capital involved very seriously in Turkey. They are talking about, the rule of law in Hungary and in Turkey, and yet they're, Brussels and Mrs. Merkel are coming to all these deals, giving billions to Mr. Erdogan, so that Erdogan allows Mrs. Merkel and the European Union to violate migrants' rights granted upon them by international law. So the hypocrisy is global. And, we could be having this discussion here about Malaysia. We could be having this discussion about Nigeria. We could be having this discussion about, parts of Myanmar. We are having this discussion today because it is our comrades of the HDP who are being targeted. But this is why the Progressive International is significant, because we have to place this oppression of HDP members and parliamentarians in the broader international context. So, comrades, I'll shut up. We're here with you, standing side by side. I will personally come to Turkey the moment I can, the moment the airports open. And the point you made was remarkably apt. They can destroy the HDP. You will come up with a new letterhead, a new name. After all, Erdogan himself comes from a tradition of Islamist parties that were banned by the military, and that they changed the name. You'll change the name, and we'll be celebrating with you under the new name. And if we can have it, on a digital kind of frame, so that we can keep changing the name every 5 seconds, but the essence will not change, and the solidarity will not subside.
Thank you, Yanis. And on that note of thinking in a more global context, I thought we could turn now to remarks from Niki Ashton, a member of Canadian Parliament, who could perhaps speak to these questions of NATO and the role of North America, which of course seems geographically far, but has such a prominent role in the geopolitics that underpin this particular political crisis. So the floor is yours, Niki.
Well, thank you so much, David, and I'm so pleased to be here, part of a crucially important event, and want to say a special greeting to Hishar Osoy and Sevim Dagdelen, Yanis. Such a pleasure to join you and to be part of a critically important discussion hosted by Progressive International, a discussion that reminds us of why it's so important for Progressive International to exist and for us to build international solidarity. I do want to talk a bit today about the authoritarian attacks that we're seeing in Turkey, but also Turkey's withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention, which deserves international condemnation. First, I want to say that I have visited Turkey many times over the years. I spent a summer learning Turkish in Istanbul, and throughout my visits, I've gotten to know many progressive people, some of who I will never forget were inspiring, very strong feminists. On a personal level, I, like many, have become very concerned about what we're hearing coming out of Turkey, about rising authoritarianism in the country under Erdoğan. Over the years, we know there have been a lot of criticism of what we've seen regarding Cyprus, the treatment of the Kurds, and increasingly an oppressive domestic agenda. Not unlike other countries, we have seen the rise of a democratically elected authoritarian regime. And we must recognize that fascists, not just in Turkey, but elsewhere, don't only come to power through military dictatorships, but use democracy in their favor. Just look at the US with Donald Trump or Brazil with Bolsonaro. It is clear that we must denounce the Turkish government's attacks on the HDP and opposition parties. We must stand in solidarity with people like you and those in Turkey right now on the ground involved in opposition politics. Along with that solidarity, we must be clear that the rights of women and members of the LGBTQ community are under attack. We know that the rise of authoritarianism is linked to the rise of misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia. Here in North America, there's been growing analysis about how emerging far-right and fascist elements in our own countries are rooted in deep-seated misogyny. This can be seen in the evidence that has emerged from numerous mass shootings, both here in Canada and the United States, including the most recent attack on Asian women in Atlanta. It is disturbing and deeply ironic that Turkey was the first country to sign on to the Istanbul Convention and now is withdrawing. This is simply not acceptable. Here in Canada, there's been much recognition of the fact that femicide, the murder and targeting of women, has increased during the COVID-19 crisis, during lockdowns, and throughout the pandemic. In fact, our parliament here in Canada just this week had a debate on the rise of violence against women in our own country and the need for bold action from our government to put a stop to gender-based violence. I know that many women in Turkey right now are standing up and fighting back against this reactionary, discriminatory agenda. And I want to offer my solidarity to them. They are an inspiration to all of us. But my final thoughts today are on where we go from here. We must find ways, like we are doing today, to show our solidarity around the world with what you in Turkey are fighting for. Yes, Progressive International is a critical vehicle in doing this, in building that solidarity. But most importantly, it is critical that we share analysis of what is going on. We've heard that analysis from Hishar, from Yanis just a few moments ago. We all know of the economic crisis taking place in Turkey at this time. We know that many are suffering. But instead of taking this crisis on behalf of the people, the right-wing extremists prefer to deflect and use the decoy approach, just like Donald Trump and many others have done. The creation of internal enemies is their focus. Progressive politicians, ethnic minorities like the Kurds, women, members of the LGBTQ community. They try and create a politics of us and them, but we cannot let them do that. Let's learn from so many that discourage us from believing in those divisions. In our part of the world, we look to unifying messages from people like Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, with whom I had the pleasure of hosting a PI event with last week, who are clear that what we need is system change. That yes, and I know, Yanis, you talked about it, that there's a small group of billionaires taking power and wealth from working people in our countries around the world. And that is the system we must challenge. We cannot be naive. Let's find ways to support those on the front lines. Let's be very clear that so many of us stand with you. We are inspired by the courageous, progressive voices in Turkey at this time, the strong voices of women in parliament and on the streets of Istanbul and across the country. We stand with you. The way to counter the authoritarian, hateful, and divisive politics around the world is to build solidarity and not to let up. We stand with you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Niki. And for the final set of comments before we turn to a broader discussion with esteemed friends and colleagues who are gathered here, I want to turn or give the floor to Sevim Dagdelen, who is a member of the Bundestag, but also chairwoman of the German-Turkish Parliamentary Group. And so could perhaps speak a bit. Germany has been, Mrs. Merkel and Germany more broadly has been name-checked by Yanis here. And I'm hoping you could speak with those two hats of yours, Sevim, first as a member of the Bundestag, as a representative in Germany, but then secondly, also in terms of the German-Turkish Parliamentary Group, where you do so much good work towards building this kind of solidarity. So the floor is yours, Sevim, before we turn to a broader discussion.
Yeah, thanks a lot, David, and hello to all the comrades and friends. First of all, I think it's very important to see that we do have a different Turkey now, like it was 5 years or 10 years ago, or even the time when Erdoğan got the power as prime minister. So some friends said he is not an ideologue, not religious even. I rather prefer to say how it is. Erdoğan is a Muslim brother, and he has an agenda. And this agenda is an Islamist agenda. And we see this Islamistic agenda not even in Turkey. We do see it in the region, how he was delivering arms and support for Islamist groups in Syria, how is delivering this and fighting against Yazidis and the Kurds in northern Iraq, how is using Islamist terrorist groups in Libya or even in Nagorno-Karabakh to kill Armenians. So he has an Islamist agenda for interior policy and for the foreign policy. And the thing is, this legal action against the HDP and the stripping of parliamentary immunity from our esteemed colleague Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu are not only an attempt to destroy the third largest party in the parliament, it's also an attack on democracy in general, an attempted coup by the Islamist pro-fascist coalition of the AKP of Erdoğan and the MHP, the nationalist fascist movement by Bahçeli. And the thing is, I mean, to be very honest, I am very sure that HDP will be forbidden, that they will close it down. And Hishar said in the past, there has been several times this kind of destroying the Kurdish parties. And every time they started new. But the thing is, we have a different Turkey now. It's different. The government and the governmental movement, or the movement which is, keeping this government, it's different than the Kemalist time in Turkey, which allowed to restart with a new party. I assume, I'm very afraid, but that Erdoğan will not allow anymore the existing and the new building of such a party like HDP. This is my first thesis. And the other thing is, the day after the arrest, for example, Turkey, the arrest of our colleague Gergerlioğlu, Turkey left the Istanbul Convention on Preventing Violence Against Women. Why did Erdoğan did that? Why did he is doing this? He has to do it because his Islamist fascist movement, which is keeping him in the government as a president. They need this like the air to breathe. They need Islamist and fascist things like this. And in foreign policy too, as I said, the autocratic Erdoğan has chosen a path of violence and the ruthless pursuit of selfish interests. Turkey continues to occupy parts of Syria and Iraq in contravention of international law. In Nagorno-Karabakh, Erdoğan has helped the family dictatorship of Aliyev in Azerbaijan to unleash a new war in the region and slaughter Armenians. And in delivering Turkey combat drones to Ukraine, that's another part. To Ukraine, Erdoğan is now trying to steer up another war in Donbass. So, but what does it mean if someone like Erdoğan is making such a policy in interior, in his country, in his home country, and in his foreign affairs? German government, for example, is dealing with Erdoğan's latest attacks on democracy and human rights in a very hypocritical way. For example, Germany, Yanis already said it, the European Union and the NATO are always, showing or hinting the Turkish-Russian relations just to hide, just to cover up their own geopolitics, which is very brutal and massive interests, politics of interest. For example, Germany is Turkey's main trading partner and one of the biggest foreign investors in Turkey. Last year, the volume of bilateral trade amounted to 36.6 billion euro. 36.6. Germany is the main recipient of Turkish exports, topping the list in 2018 with about 10% of share. Germany is one of the three main sources of Turkish imports, accounting to about 9% of all imports into Turkey. Russia cannot deal with this, with Germany or even other countries of the European Union. Russia is not even under the first 10 investors or sharing partners in import or export. The other thing is the arms exports. Current authorizations by the German government are in 2020 arms exports to Turkey worth about 23 million were approved, and the figure for 2019 was 31. And the biggest shaming point of the German foreign policy is the export of war weapons. Turkey was the main recipient of actual exports of war weapons in 2018 and 19. 2 years, Turkey was on the top of the list of war weapons. So no dual use or something else. It was war weapons just to use it for the war. And this brings me to the point that why is Germany is doing this? You know, on the 24th of April, we do have the Memorial Day of the genocide on the Armenians done by the Ottoman Empire and with the assistance of the German Empire. And when a socialist, a social democrat, parliamentarian called Karl Liebknecht was hinting about this genocide going on in Turkey on the Armenians, was hinting this and trying to get attention in the German Reichstag for that. Bethmann Hollweg, the chancellor, said, well, we have to keep Turkey on our side. It doesn't matter what it costs. This is said by the German chancellor more than 100 years ago. And Bethmann Hollweg of our days is called Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel wants to keep Turkey on their side in the NATO. It doesn't matter what it costs. So it doesn't matter if it costs the life of Armenians again in Nagorno-Karabakh, the life of Kurds in Syria, where Turkey was 2018. It was about 3 years now, the anniversary of the intervention of the Turks in Afrin, in northern Syria, side by side with Islamist terrorist groups, with German Leopard 2 tanks. They slaughtered Kurdish people in Afrin. And it doesn't matter if it costs the life of Kurds even in Turkey for the German Chancellor. And that was the reason why the German Chancellor was blocking the European-wide arms embargo to Turkey the last 6 or 7, 8 months, when Turkey was threatening Greece and Cyprus in the Mediterranean Sea. And it still is blocking and doing his veto to the European summit again on these issues, and even the sanctions. Because, well, I have to say very frankly, I'm not a friend of economical sanctions. Economical sanctions are always punishing the people, as we see in Iraq or in Syria. So I'm not a friend of this. But even the personal, the individual sanctions, now the European Union lifted just because the new US administration by Joe Biden was asking the European Union to lift the sanctions against some individuals in Turkey because of the Mediterranean Sea issue. So we see the new administration by Joe Biden is more on the side of Erdoğan than the last one was of Trump. Joe Biden and the European Union, even the chief of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, they are on the side by Turkey. And that's the thing we have to fight. Being in solidarity with the women in Turkey, being in solidarity with the Kurds in Turkey means attacking NATO, attacking European Union Commission, attacking the Western allies of Turkey, to stop the arms exports, to stop the financial investments to Turkey, to stop to stop the stabilization help for Erdoğan and his Islamist fascist movement and government in Turkey. And that's why we in the German parliament try to help individually, even our parliamentarian friends in Turkey, as the German Turkish parliamentary group, but even as the head of the Foreign Affairs Working Group and the parliamentary group of the left. We activated some years ago a program in the German Bundestag, parliamentarians are helping parliamentarians. So this is a very original, unique thing, what we have. I've never seen it in some other region in the world, in some other parliaments. I think probably it is a really good role model, an example for other parliaments as well. So we have something like parliamentarians helping parliamentarians, a campaign where we show our solidarity to parliamentarians. And we initialized it in 2016 when the repression against parliamentarians started after the coup attempt failed. And the basic idea is that the members of the German Bundestag who can carry out their work in safety should help fellow parliamentarians who are at risk in other countries and persecuted human rights defenders. Members of the German Bundestag have a network of international contacts which they can use on behalf of fellow parliamentarians who are at risk. This is what we have started 2016, and we want to restart it now for our parliamentarian friends of the HDP in Turkey. But as I said, these are just individual things and at least what we can do. But I think the most work is to bring their own governments to the point that they stop their help for Erdogan. And this is, I think, from my point of view, the best solidarity what we can show. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sevim. Quite a comprehensive and inspiring picture of what the crisis looks like from Germany and what it might mean to take these questions of solidarity seriously. We've got about 15 minutes left in the session. I thought we could turn back to you, Hishar, to reflect on some of this commentary with an additional comment, which is to say, I think for many of us, the HDP has been so inspiring as a political party because internationalism and solidarity are at its forefront. And I recall being at the party congress last year and this tremendous celebration of this sort of pluralistic approach to its politics. Such an incredible coalition that's come together inside the party. And I wonder, Sevim has given us many ideas, so has Yanis and so has Niki, about what solidarity might mean in this context. You've, in your opening remarks, helped us get a sense of what the situation is like on the ground. But in a more forward-looking sense, how do you think that political forces in their respective parliaments and state houses, and even on the streets with respect to social movements and individual activists, can actually take this forward and concretely begin to dismantle some of these systems of support for Erdogan, but dispel some of the underlying myths that prevent the formation of a stronger solidarity movement with the Kurdish struggle and with the plight of the HDP at this present juncture?
David. Okay. So do you want me to do it now, or maybe to get a couple of questions or comments before we do it? Because, yeah, however you want to pursue it.
Why don't I'll just pass you the floor. Well, actually, now that I see Andre has a question, I'll pass the floor to Andre. If anyone else has a question, feel free to either put it in the chat or raise your hand, but the floor is yours, Andre.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Hello, everybody, dear comrades, dear friends. I'm as well a member of the German parliament and spokesman for European politics of Die Linke. And I just want to add some arguments from our side, from Germany, and this is the same line what Sevim said. Because it's a bit different how we see it from Germany, as for example, Yanis, who spoke about the perspective from Greece. I would like to remind you that in 2015, I think it was 2015, when in June, HDP entered parliament and AKP didn't have any majority. There was a huge crisis for Erdogan and he didn't know where to go. And then there were new elections on 1st of November. And 2 weeks before of these new elections, Angela Merkel went to the big palace of Erdogan and made some kind of support for him. It was very clear. It was 2 weeks before the election, was a big support. And I see some parallel now. Erdogan is in crisis. It's complicated for him to survive. And now we had on Tuesday and Friday, or on Thursday and Friday, we had the EU summit. And the EU summit after the announcement of banning of HDP, after the non-compliance with the court decision on Demirtas and Kavala, after the leaving of the Istanbul Convention and all this, and this EU summit supported Erdogan. Now with the perspective of the customs union especially, and new money for the so-called refugee deal. And I have to remind that this refugee deal, we are criticizing this from very good point of view. Every leftist around the world is criticizing this from the point of view of breach of international law. But this refugee deal was an idea of German government in cooperation with Turkish with Davutoglu in that time, and it was agreed one day before the EU summit. I think it was in 2016 in the Dutch embassy. And the idea behind this to bring the other European states in the same line concerning Turkey. So this is a special situation. Sevim spoke about the history of this, but I think we have to be clear about this. And yes, I think we should criticize our governments in Europe, especially for in that moment to upgrade relations to Turkey, to bring the new the perspective of custom unions. We have to criticize this very much. But of course, first of all, we need solidarity with you, and whatever we can do, we do.
Thank you, Andre. Tini, do you have a comment? And then we'll pass it back to you, Hishar, to close the session.
Okay, thank you.
We should hear you now, Tini. Okay, yeah, here we go. Struggling a bit with technical difficulties. How about now?
Is it functioning now? Yes.
Perfectly.
Yeah.
This is the problem, Hishar, of getting elderly people into the discussion. But
No,
I
no,
managed.
you're youngest always.
I managed that. I think for the moment, but I would like to hear your comment, Hishar. It is important that we do not only say that we are in solidarity with you, but we try to do something. And I think that one of the possibilities would be that in our national parliaments, we try to have motions adopted which concentrate on three issues. One, that Turkey has to execute binding verdicts of the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, which means immediate release of Osman Kavala and Selahattin Demirtas. Second, that we should demand Turkey to stick to its signature under the Istanbul Convention, and to demand from the Turkish parliament to not to support the president in his attempt to get rid of this convention. And thirdly, to ask Turkey to stand to its commitment of pluralist democracy, which means not lifting the immunity of members of parliament and not the closure of one of the biggest party of the countries. If in, for example, the member states of the Council of Europe, but also in other states, motions with these 3 points would be passed, then that would be a signal to Erdogan. I know that the president of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe is starting his visit tomorrow in Turkey, and he also will emphasize on these 3 issues. And I think that we are under time pressure because, as you said, Tisha, that already on the 31st, there will be the first attempt to get HDP closed. So perhaps we could have some combined action in member states, member parliaments, especially by the left forces, to get such motions adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tini. You sure?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Andre, and Tini, and Sevim, and Niki, and Yanis, and so many fruitful discussions and so many suggestions. So I just would like to very briefly wrap up and be a bit concrete and specific about my proposals, also how to be in solidarity with the HDP in such a difficult situation. I mean, the first thing is thank you, Yanis, for saying that your struggle is our struggle, not in a kind of general symbolic sense, but practically, I would say that is the case, because if we are able to somehow undermine, destroy Erdogan's political rule in this country, there will be dramatic consequences of this for the peoples of Europe and the Middle East, and of course, Greece, who is our neighbor. So Erdoğan has been blackmailing Europe, taking Europe hostage, and turning the whole Middle East into a battlefield. And of course, if we are able to somehow stop Erdoğan, many of these things are going to change. So in that sense, HDP struggle is definitely not just for the people who live in Turkey, Kurds, Turks, Armenians, and others, but it's going to have regional and even global consequences. The second thing is, Yanis is definitely right. These people are banal people, I would say. And all of these banal people, they are somehow related to each other. Erdoğan loves Orban, for example. Probably every night they have phone calls. I don't know. They share how they are messing up with their countries. Erdoğan and Trump and others. So, I mean, all these forces kind of darkness, it always reminds me of like the Lord of the Rings, all those nasty, bad people somehow like working together. And so all the good people, which is us, we should be working together somehow. And I think there is enough ground for that. It's not just a kind of left international spirit, but definitely in a kind of globalizing world in a very unfortunate way, should also these global tendencies bring us closer to each other. So all the kind of traitors, terrorists, enemies of the state of the world, I mean, we should be finding ways to come closer to each other at this very critical moment. And the Progressive International can actually play a very, very crucial role in this regard. And in that context, thanks again for organizing this event. Second, which is very important, also raised by Niki and Sevim in particular, these attacks on the HDP are part of an authoritarianism which is highly gendered, and it is particularly misogynist and sexist. So it is not a coincidence that the closure of the HDP and the withdrawal from Istanbul Convention, they happen in the same week. I mean, it is the same misogynist, racist, patriarchal mentality, fascist mentality there. So in that sense, David, I would like to make a specific proposal to you. Please be in touch with the HDP's Women's Assembly, because HDP women, they are organized in an autonomous way. They have their own separate department of diplomacy. And I know they have been in dialogue with many Turkish women's groups in Turkey, as well as many European and Middle Eastern organizations, women's organizations. They are now organizing a very powerful agenda to defend the Istanbul Convention. And I think that if Progressive International can also organize something specific about this with, diverse women groups in Turkey, including the HDP, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I know they will be very happy to assist you in that sense, so that, there is a good debate there. That is very important. One more issue is on the 26th of April, which is a Monday, and there will be the first hearing of the Kobani indictment against our co-chair, Selahattin Demirtas, Figen Yüksekdağ, and many others. 108 people actually will be prosecuted, all members of HDP Central Executive Board in 2014. So this case is putting on trial both the resistance of Kobani and HDP support to that resistance. And this case was opened just 2 weeks after the decision of the Grand Chamber of European Court of Human Rights on the release of Demirtas. This is kind of the counter move of the government to respond to the court decision, not to implement it mainly. So we have already sent an invitation for people to come, if possible, if the pandemic allows, to come and to observe in Turkey. I know, Yanis, you have been preparing for a visit to Turkey, and we would be definitely very, very happy to host you here. Our team is also in dialogue with David as well, I know. So, which is good. You may want to consider maybe coming that particular week, which is 26th of April, and also, try to observe the hearing somehow. If that is possible, we would really appreciate that one. And for those who can't come, we are in dialogue with various parliaments across Europe. If they can do something on that very day, which is the April 26th, I don't know, maybe you can have a photo of our co-chairs or the HDP or something, and then send solidarity statements. So we can turn that day, because that day, and that case is also being used as the main evidence for the closure case. So it's very central for us. We'll provide you with more information, but let's turn April 26th, the day they want to prosecute and try our co-chairs. I think we should turn that day into a trial of President Erdoğan and his atrocities. With the help of our colleagues across the world, we can do that. So these are my specific proposals. And thank you, Sevim, again, for the Deputy Helping Deputies program, which we did in 2016 and 17, which was very successful. And we would be really very happy to do that again. We are in need of solidarity. Of course, I mean, there are so many different ways people can organize their forms of solidarity, but my specific suggestion would be, please, with your groups, your parties, come together and give a systematic thought to what is happening in Turkey and the HDP and the specific ways you can actually be a part of this struggle. It is not, Yanis said it, and I wholeheartedly believe this, literally this is your struggle. I mean, we don't believe in those borders and boundaries imposed on our peoples and our parties. We don't believe in that. But we do engage in politics, unfortunately, within those national boundaries somehow. And as I said, there is a lot of pessimism in the air, particularly people in diaspora are so worried about us, the HDP here. But I think the greatest answer our people gave was Nowruz celebrations. There is a lot of spirit of resistance and struggle. I always say, through years of repression and resistance. We have a lot of repression, but we have histories of resistance too. And we have accumulated a lot of experience, knowledge, and skills. And I have no doubt that we are going to not just survive this, overcome these challenges, but we are going to be able to propose an alternative to what President Erdoğan has been doing in this country. Please stay in touch. We will be also, we already have individually, I mean, we do have a lot of communication with a lot of people who are here now listening to us. Yeah, let's all the so-called bad people of the world unite, I would say, all the terrorists, traitors, enemies of the state, which these are the labels that the governments, they are imposing on us, which shows that we are on the right track, on the right path, I would say. Thank you again for being here and for showing us the solidarity. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who's here in the meeting and those of you who are watching the streams at home. Hishar has given us a very, very concrete set of proposals for how we can do, as we in the Progressive International like to say, make solidarity more than a slogan, turn it into the action that it has always been in the grand tradition of left internationalism. So it is on that note that I wish you all a very wonderful, restful Sunday evening, because tomorrow, Monday, this struggle starts anew. And you know where to find me if you want to stay in touch, ask questions. You can rely on me, Shar, to take forward these proposals, organize around the 26th of April, as well as be in touch with the women's group about the organizing towards the Istanbul Convention. Ertuğrul, I see that you have unmuted yourself. Did you have a final comment, or were you just saying goodbye?
No, I was just going to say goodbye to Tini and Andre, whom I know from Thailand, to all of you.
His old colleagues.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to turn off the live stream now, and I hope you have a